Poughkeepsie, New York. A quiet town resting along the Hudson River. Families walk dogs, kids ride bikes. Life feels safe. But sometimes in the safest looking places, the darkest nightmares are hidden behind closed doors. Nicole Addimando was a mother, a friend, a gymnastics coach. Always smiling, always polite. The kind of woman you wouldn't expect to be in the headlines. Unless it was for a charity event or a school bake sale. But on a cold night in 2017, Nicole walked into a police station. Trembling, her face pale, her voice barely above a whisper. And what she said next would change everything. I shot my partner. I didn't want to, but he wouldn't stop. In a matter of hours, Nicole went from a victim of years of alleged abuse to a suspect in a cold-blooded murder. The media painted her as a killer. The prosecution called it premeditated. But Nicole had a different story. One that started long before that night, with years of torment, control, and fear. This is the story of Nicole Addimando, a mother who claims she had no way out, a woman caught between survival and the system, and a justice system that refused to believe her pain. Was it murder, or was it mercy? Was she a monster, or just another forgotten victim? You're about to hear the evidence, the interviews, the diaries, the bruises that no one believed. This is a story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about justice. Nicole met Christopher Grover when she was just a teenager. He was charismatic, older, and confident, an instructor at the local gymnastics gym where Nicole had just started working. She looked up to him, trusted him, and soon, she loved him. What began as a quiet romance between coworkers quickly evolved into something deeper. They moved in together, had a child, then another. To the outside world, they looked like a normal, happy family. Chris was a well-known figure in town. He taught kids gymnastics, made people laugh, and posted adorable photos of his kids online. Nicole, too, was kind and sweet. She volunteered at school, baked cupcakes for birthdays, and held her baby close every chance she got. But behind closed doors, the cracks were beginning to show. Nicole started pulling away from friends. She stopped going out. Her smile was thinner, her laughter shorter. No one knew what was really happening in that small apartment on Van Wagner Road. No one saw the bruises, not at first. Nicole later testified that the abuse started slowly. A push, a slap, then cruel words that cut deep. You're worthless. You're nothing without me. If you leave, I'll take the kids. Then came the threats, then the violence.
According to Nicole, Chris began forcing himself on her.
Using her body as a weapon, filming it, storing the videos on his computer. She said he burned her with a curling iron, left bruises where no one would see. And yet, she stayed. Why? That's the question people always ask. But unless you've been in that kind of cage, you don't know how hard it is to find the key. Nicole believed, truly believed, that if she left, Chris would kill her, or worse, take her kids. So she endured. Until one night, she said she couldn't anymore. And with one shot from a pistol, everything shattered. It was September 27th, 2017. The kids had gone to bed. Her eyes were red. Her body was tense. Chris walked into the room. What happened next is known only to Nicole and the silence that followed. Nicole says Chris was angry that night. She says he had threatened to kill her before, that he told her, "You won't survive if you ever leave me." She claimed he reached for the drawer where he kept his gun. That's when she grabbed it first. A single shot. To the head. Chris Grover was dead. Nicole didn't run. She didn't hide. She didn't even try to cover it up. She got in the car, drove straight to the police station, sat down, and told them what she'd done. But the moment she confessed, the moment those words left her mouth, the machine of justice began turning. Not for her protection, but for her prosecution. Nicole was booked into jail that very night. Mugshot taken, charges filed, second-degree murder. Manslaughter was off the table. The DA wanted the maximum. The police didn't believe she was a battered woman. There were no recent injuries, no black eye, no broken bones. She seemed calm, one officer later testified. Cold, not like someone who had been abused. But trauma doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it shows up years later, in nightmares, in shaking hands, in the way a person flinches at kindness. Nicole's lawyers argued that she had been the victim of long-term abuse, that she'd killed Chris in self-defense, that she feared for her life. But the prosecution saw it differently. They said she had planned it, that she waited until he was sleeping, that she could have left, that she chose murder. The courtroom was divided. On one side, Nicole's supporters, domestic violence advocates, former friends who had finally learned the truth. On the other, Chris's family, loyal, heartbroken, insisted that he was not a monster.
The prosecution painted Nicole as manipulative, deceitful, capable of lying to get custody of her children. They pointed to the lack of police reports, the absence of medical records. If it was really that bad, the DA asked, why didn't she leave? Why didn't she tell someone? The jury listened in silence, and Nicole cried quietly. For every moment she stayed, for every time she didn't speak up, for every time she was made to feel like leaving would be worse than staying. That's what abuse does. It silences you, makes you question your own reality. But in court, silence is often used against you. Nicole's attorneys brought in digital evidence, photos, messages, videos, disturbing ones. There were images of Nicole's injuries, burn marks, bruises. There were videos Chris had taken without her consent during violent encounters. The jury saw them. Some looked away. Others began to shift in their seats. But it still wasn't enough. The judge ruled much of the evidence inadmissible, too prejudicial, he said, too disturbing. Nicole wasn't allowed to fully show the jury the hell she had lived through. Her voice was stifled again, just like it had been in that house, just like it had been for years. In the eyes of the court, she was no longer a mother, no longer a survivor. She was simply a criminal. After weeks of testimony, the jury returned. Nicole Addimando was found guilty of second-degree murder and criminal possession of a weapon. The sentence? 19 years to life. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Nicole stared blankly ahead, tears streaming down her face. She would not be going home to her children. She would not be believed. Her story would be reduced to a file, a headline, a warning to other women that self-defense isn't always enough, that surviving may cost you your freedom. The public response was immediate and divided. Activists and abuse survivors rallied behind Nicole. They pointed out the systemic failures, the lack of protection, the stigma, the impossible expectations placed on battered women. Hashtags like #FreeNikki began trending. A petition to commute her sentence gained thousands of signatures. But others insisted justice had been served. She killed a father, they said. Her story doesn't excuse murder. And yet, buried beneath those arguments, a darker truth began to surface. That women who defend themselves, especially with force, are punished more harshly than those who don't. That if Nicole had died that night instead, she might have been believed. But because she lived, she became the villain.
This will build toward her appeal, the shocking reversal of her sentence, and the painful final twist that few people saw coming. Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison for women in New York. This is where Nicole Addimando would begin serving her sentence. Stripped of her freedom, her children, her voice. The prison was cold, sterile, a world made of metal and rules. Time moved slowly. Her name was replaced by a number, her identity by a label, inmate, and still, she tried to hold on to pieces of herself. She drew, wrote, tried to stay strong. For her son, for her daughter. Every night, she would look at their photos. Every night, she would wonder if they still remembered the warmth of her arms, the sound of her lullabies. But what haunted her the most wasn't the prison bars, it was the silence. The knowing that she'd survived, but no one believed why. Outside the prison, something remarkable was happening. Nicole's story began to circulate in advocacy circles. Her case was picked up by groups like the Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act (DVSJA) initiative. Women saw themselves in Nicole: mothers, daughters, sisters, survivors. People began asking questions. Why was Nicole given the maximum sentence? Why wasn't the abuse considered more heavily? Why are survivors punished for not dying? Nicole's case became a rallying cry, not just for her freedom, but for all the women who'd been forced to choose between their life and the life of their abuser. The movement grew louder. Letters poured in, journalists picked up the story, lawmakers were confronted. And soon, the system that silenced her would be forced to listen. In 2019, New York passed the DVSJA, a law allowing sentencing judges to reduce prison time for survivors of domestic violence if they could prove the abuse played a significant role in their crime. The law was designed for people like Nicole. And so, her lawyers filed an appeal. They submitted pages of documentation, photos, expert testimony, psychological evaluations. For the first time in years, Nicole had something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope.
The appeal reached the New York State Supreme Court, and in a rare moment of judicial reckoning, the court made a decision that stunned the state. On April 13, 2021, the court ruled in Nicole Addimando's favor. Her original 19-to-life sentence was vacated under the DVSJA. The court acknowledged that the abuse she endured was real, prolonged, and directly contributed to the killing. Her sentence was reduced to 7.5 years, and with time served, Nicole could be home within months. Tears flowed from the courtroom gallery. Nicole's supporters hugged, some sobbed. Inside the prison, when the news reached her, Nicole dropped the phone in shock. She had thought she would die behind those walls, and now she was going home. In 2022, Nicole Addimando walked out of prison and into the arms of her loved ones. She looked different, older, thinner, but her eyes held something powerful. Not freedom, but resilience. She was reunited with her children under supervision. They had grown. She had missed so many milestones: first teeth, first steps, first words. But she held them tight. And for the first time in years, she whispered bedtime stories instead of court statements. But her life wasn't fully hers. She would still serve time under supervision. She still carried the weight of judgment. And for some, she was still guilty. Not everyone welcomed Nicole's release. Chris Grover's family continued to speak out. They lost a son, a brother, a father. They said Nicole lied, manipulated the system. They said justice had been undone. Social media lit up with debates. She's a murderer, some wrote. She should have called the police. She had other options. But those who knew abuse knew better. Because not every bruise shows. Not every victim screams. And not every survivor makes it out alive. Nicole did. And that, for some, was unforgivable. Nicole Addimando's story is not neat. It's not simple. And it's not over. It asks questions we don't like answering. What is self-defense? How do we weigh the invisible trauma? Why do we expect perfect victims? Nicole is not a hero. She's not a monster. She's a woman who made an impossible decision after years of torment. Whether you believe her or not, one thing is clear. Her story exposed a truth that our justice system tries to ignore: that surviving abuse doesn't mean you're free.
that escaping doesn't always mean running, and that sometimes when no one hears your screams,